So I'm going to talk a little bit about do a little bit of a deeper dive. I think Kate Gordon set the stage pretty well with her comments in the last panel, and all the panelists started talking about carbon pricing. Now, it's no secret that the U.S. is no longer in a leadership role on this issue, on climate change. When we joined the UNFCCC in 1992, President Bush said the U.S. will be a leader in addressing this threat to the global environment. And up until last year, we were. And now we're not. But that doesn't mean we're not moving forward around the world. And it doesn't mean that all hope is gone, all hope is lost for action in Washington. As you know, President Trump has withdrawn the United States from the Paris Agreement. And the EPA has moved forward to repeal the Clean Power Plan, which was the central effort under the Obama administration. In addition, the EPA has proposed repealing several methane emission regulations and tracking regulations. They're now talking about lowering the CAFE standards on automobiles. But all that stuff is being challenged in the courts. As a matter of fact, in a few days, I think, is the final public hearing on the idea to repeal the Clean Power Plan in Wyoming, of all places. Wonder why they chose Wyoming. But regardless of those efforts, what's happening behind the scenes in Washington is increased discussion that we need to address this issue, and we need to address it with a market solution. And so while I don't think we're going to see anything this year, and we probably won't see anything until we see a change in the leadership in Washington in terms of either one of the houses of Congress flipping or further change, I think there's a good chance we'll see it. We'll see something before the end of the Trump administration, and we might see one of those houses flip. And I think that what's interesting is the discussions going on both sides of the aisle on this issue. Now, my organization, the Partnership for Responsible Growth, is the tip of the spear on pushing for carbon pricing in Washington. And we have been advocating for the last couple of years, putting a fee on carbon and using the revenue to reduce the corporate tax rate. The idea had a lot of momentum. We had 30 to 40 congressional Republicans agreeing to endorse the idea if it would actually become public and hit the floor. We had a dozen Republican senators lined up. But it didn't become part of the discussion. Ultimately, Congress decided to pass a major tax cut program without a revenue source and just add to the deficit, or in some cases, they believe supply-side economics will pay for it. But that doesn't mean that the discussion is gone. It has shifted. So now concern among deficit hawks on the right is heightened because they basically look at the tax cut package and say, well, that made the deficit worse. The spending bills that we're agreeing to are making the deficit worse. We need to do something on the revenue side. And we're going to need to address this in some form or fashion. Now, they'll say cut spending, but they know it's not realistic. At the same time, on the right, let's take a look at the right for a minute. Several groups, several Republican conservative groups have come out for carbon pricing. You have a coalition of libertarian think tanks like the Niskanen Center, R Street Institute, which is a free enterprise-oriented Republican think tank. You have the Alliance for Market Solutions, a new organization that's conservatives that has come out for carbon pricing. They did a poll of young Republicans and came out and told us that 60% of young Republicans favor addressing climate change through a price on carbon. So we're definitely seeing a little bit of a coalition around this issue. In private, when you talk to Republican congressmen, they will say, well, look, I know climate change is a problem, and I agree it's human-caused. I don't really go out and say that in public, but I understand it. I'm not stupid. And yeah, I agree. I like the idea of a market solution. And frankly, I kind of like your solution. I'm not sure I trust the other side to really put that on the table, because there's a lot of distrust in Washington. But when you see increasing numbers among young Republicans calling out for action on this, believe me, the older members of the Republican Party, they're listening. What is it? Some 23 college Republican organizations have now endorsed the idea of a tax on carbon with a complete dividend. As we saw last year or the year before, the Climate Leadership Council came out. These are Republican statesmen, Secretaries Baker, Schultz, Paulson, luminaries in the Republican Party, saying, look, let's do a fee and dividend approach. Let's put a fee on carbon and dividend 100% of the proceeds. And that's attracted a significant amount of corporate support, that idea. It's easier for a corporation to endorse a fee and dividend approach because they're not getting any of the money, and therefore it looks good to society, right? It looks good to consumers. In reality, they know that when Congress sees that revenue opportunity, they're not going to let it go. So what's attractive about the idea of a fee on carbon is it produces significant revenue. And whether you're a deficit hawk or whether you have spending priorities in mind, that's what's attractive. So the last couple of years, we were pitching using the revenues for corporate tax cuts. That failed. Obviously, we passed a corporate tax cut bill. We didn't have a fee on carbon in there. So now we've shifted our discussion to, well, maybe this is how you pay for infrastructure. A $49 fee on carbon, increasing at 2% a year over inflation, produces $2.1 trillion, according to the Treasury Department, over 10 years. If you rebate 50% of the proceeds to low and middle income households, they actually come out ahead in terms of when you compare what they're receiving versus their increased energy expenses. And if you do it on a per capita basis, the poorer you are, the more ahead you come out, right? So that has good politics to it. That still leaves $1 trillion for infrastructure over 10 years. That's attractive to some people in Washington that think we have a big infrastructure deficit, which we do. So in the long run, that's probably the biggest opportunity. Let's use that money towards infrastructure. And then there would be a big fight over how do you dole out the infrastructure money, et cetera. Our organization is agnostic about how you use the money. We just want to see a price on carbon. And so we're just offering these ideas to legislators with the idea of saying, look, here's your revenue opportunity. And that's what gets them excited. We brought, for example, Tom Stevenson, big Republican, former Bush ambassador to Portugal, brought him to Washington to talk about the fee and dividend idea, go up to Capitol Hill. We had 12 Republican senator meetings in one day. A big Republican donor walks in, you're going to get 12 meetings in one day. And in every meeting, what was evident to him was, well, there's not much interest in this fee and dividend idea, but when they heard about the revenues, their eyes lit up. And they said, boy, well, maybe that's how we pay for X or pay for Y or all these things we can't find money to pay for, right? So, you know, he came around to the idea of maybe the best way to get a fee on carbon is to scratch their itch, show them what the revenue will pay for. So I'm not saying anything's going to happen soon, but I do think the stars are aligning. And on the Democratic side, where you've seen a big debate go on over the years, what's better, cap and trade versus a carbon tax versus a regulatory approach? Lots of internal fighting. Now there's a shift in thinking among the major environmental groups in Washington. We just hosted a meeting the week before last. Major environmental groups got together to start saying, look, we need to start thinking about what we might put on the table and what we could get behind. If we could all get behind carbon pricing, that might move the ball forward. Because if we're split, it's not going to help, right? And we didn't have 100% agreement, but the conversation has shifted. Everyone recognizes that a regulatory approach is no longer going to work because a regulatory approach is too easily undone. That much we have experienced. That's what we have seen, right? So while some groups are still intent on fighting the regulatory effort in the courts, and that will continue, there's largely there's a coalescing going on around we need to get behind carbon pricing and what that might look like. And so this year our effort is convening all the major environmental groups, just having a listening tour, just bringing them together. What's your perspective? What do you want to see? What would be the details of a fee on carbon that might be attractive to you, right? What might this legislation look like? Without trying to pin anybody down, will you support this yet? Because they're not ready for that. And so we're doing that. And the second thing we're finding is we're doing a state-level effort where we have identified the Republicans who are most persuadable on this issue. We're going into their states and convening meetings with local businesses. So we were in Nashville last week, and we hosted a meeting with business executives from Nashville, Chamber of Commerce, et cetera. 100% of the group assembled said, this makes so much sense. Pricing carbon is the way to go. Let's put a fee on it. Let's use the revenue for infrastructure. This is how much of the revenue we'd get back for infrastructure, and it could pay for this, 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 and this in Tennessee. And we like that idea, so we'll take that pitch to our senators. We'll take that pitch to our congressmen. And so when you start to see a little bit of bottom-up pressure in their districts with the right locations, I think you can start to see some loosening up of their thinking. Now, obviously, states are moving ahead. You all are familiar with the We Are Still In effort. States and municipalities across the country said, we're still in Paris, the federal government can drop out, but we're still in. California, of course, has been a trendsetter on climate change. But they're not the only one looking at this issue. Here in North Carolina, we have a Republican legislature, right? It's even got a supermajority control. And yet it just passed the Competitive Energy Solutions Act, which creates incentives for more renewable energy in North Carolina. So now, North Carolina has moved up to second in the country on solar power, solar energy generation, some 6,000 megawatts of cumulative renewable energy generation. And by 2016, 2 years ago, clean energy jobs in North Carolina totaled 34,000. That's more people that are employed in the coal industry in West Virginia. So states are seeing what's going on. The Northeast Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative is moving forward. It's working. So we're seeing states move forward. And then let's take a look around the world. Carbon pricing is becoming the new mantra. Singapore just announced a very modest carbon tax. Mexico has a carbon tax. Canada has said, okay, we're going to do a national tax this year at $10 a ton minimum. Now, Alberta's ahead of that. British Columbia's ahead of that. But they're ratcheting it up, and by 2022, it's going to be $50 Canadian. If you put a fee on carbon, one of the beauties is you can protect your trade-exposed, energy-intensive industries at your border. Under the WTO rules, legally, you can impose that fee on imports. So think about that. President Trump just proposed tariffs on aluminum and steel to stop the imports from China. A carbon fee imposed at the border would make U.S. production more competitive and Chinese production less competitive. A representative of Alcoa walked me through the economics and said, if you did that, $25 a ton or more, we're going to reopen the 2 aluminum smelters that we closed in the Pacific Northwest, because all of a sudden our aluminum is going to be cheaper than Chinese aluminum, because theirs is powered by coal and ours is powered by hydro, right? So, because you can impose that fee, as Kate pointed out, we might see someone else imposing it on us. I would not be surprised to see Canada in the next couple of years say, okay, you're going to do all this trade war stuff. We're going to impose a fee at the border on U.S. goods on your carbon content, because we have a price and you don't. That will wake up Congress. So that's happening, and people are recognizing that. France has threatened to impose their carbon tax on our goods. So, and several countries in Europe have a carbon tax now, plus all of Europe has the ETS carbon pricing system. So around the world, we're seeing Japan now, Switzerland, Sweden, lots of countries are imposing carbon fees. And I think in the long run, the only way we're going to address this situation is with a global, uniform, significant price on carbon. And I favor a carbon tax. I'm happy to have that debate. But cap and trade would get you there. It's not going to get you the emissions reductions a carbon tax would get you, particularly if it's significant, but it will get you there eventually. So how a country gets there, I don't think matters. Each country can choose that for itself. Each country can choose what to do with the revenues for itself. But let's put a significant price on carbon. And I think that's the direction we're moving. So smart businesses are adapting to that. And I'll give you an example of that. In Europe, you have a significant price on carbon, right? At least a modest price. I'll say that from the ETS system over there. Voestalpine is a major steel maker in Austria. They're paying that higher price for electricity, higher price for energy, et cetera, right? So what did they do? They canvassed the globe, decided on the Western Hemisphere, came to the United States, chose the United States, and spent $1 billion to build a plant in Texas which makes iron briquettes. Why Texas? Because of our cheap natural gas. Those iron briquettes take iron ore that is 57% pure and take it up to 98% pure. They then ship those iron briquettes back to Austria and use them to make steel. And that dramatically lowers the carbon footprint of their steel, dramatically lowers the energy cost inputs to making steel, right? Because of our cheap natural gas. That's the way companies are thinking today. That's the way companies are, and their attitude is, when the US imposes a price on carbon, the way Europe has one, we're going to build a steel mill right next door to our plant in Texas. And we're going to make American steel, and it's going to be the lowest carbon steel in the US. So they're already doing it in Europe. They've got the lowest carbon steel available in Europe. And they don't worry too much about Chinese competition because they make a very high-end steel that the Chinese don't know how to make yet. So that's forward thinking. That's the way businesses have to adapt to the new reality. And they see it. Whether you're pricing carbon, some 1,400 companies now have an internal price on carbon, 100 of the Global 500. So that's happening. Companies are recognizing it. Companies are recognizing this is coming. It's just a matter of time. And hopefully we won't wait too long. So do we have time for questions or not? Are we done? Who's in charge here? Don't think we do. Okay, we'll get us back on track, and we'll take questions later. Thank you.